Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. Going to 5,000 subscribers by September 7th. Texas LSU, can't wait for that game. But here to talk Cowboys, here to talk draft, here to talk a little bit of college football as well. But as we get into things here, Cowboys draft visits, how does that play into what we're going to do? That's kind of been the secret to what I look at, why I was successful with kind of breaking things down last year when I foresaw, whether it was the Leighton Vander Esch, Connor Williams, and ultimately Michael Gallup, and how our draft strung along there. And it's something I've done with my buddy for years. And so I wanted to kind of break this element of this component of the draft down to kind of get some my logic on some of the things I think we'll do on Friday. Obviously, Thursday night, with the draft being day one, unless we trade up, which I don't see happening, just again based upon the visits we've seen, unless we trade up, there's nothing for us to really look for as Cowboys fans other than just following what our divisional opponents are going to be doing. But, Friday night it's going to be kind of the get-go for us. And obviously, day one, reason being we used our first-round pick to acquire Amari Cooper, which many of us are thrilled about, and it's working out, so far so good. So, so far we're off to a good start in day one without day one even getting here. But, as there was an article on DallasCowboys.com going over the anatomy of our draft visits. Many teams get 30 draft visits, and that's outside of local guys that you have that are able to visit the facilities and not count towards the 30, but 30 in general for the NFL teams. And one of the things is with the Cowboys in recent history, and this article starts with 2014 and on, is their philosophy on targeting guys close that are being mocked to where they're going to pick. Very rarely do they reach and visit and bring guys in that are well outside of the range of the picks that they're going to have. The other thing is the Cowboys oftentimes will load up at the position of interest that they're targeting or that they're interested in, maybe 4 or 5, sometimes 6 players at a certain position that are all projected to go within, a round or two of each other. That position this year for the Cowboys, if we're looking at our first pick at number 58 in the second round, is safety. And we brought in 6 guys at the safety position. Most of them, if not all 6 of them, are mocked to go somewhere between the second and third round. So that kind of, tells me right off the bat that's what the Cowboys are looking at. Of the other guys that we had, really on our list, not too many of them at other positions are mocked to go that high. So we know that they're keying in on a safety. And I've heard people, talk about different positions, and I'm not saying that, I'm not ruling out the potential that the Cowboys, if, address another position, but that's oftentimes if somebody on their board just, takes a drastic drop and whatnot. Right now they have to plan on, the draft kind of falling out a certain way, and this is realistically what they're going to be looking at. Also in conjunction with the holes on their team. I haven't done my State of the Union video for the Cowboys yet, just in terms of addressing our entire offseason. I'll wait post-draft to do that and tie that all together. But they're in win-now mode, and that's very, it's very clear. And, the Cowboys have had good luck and recent success with drafting players who can contribute pretty early on right away. It's a big component of why we've had success in the recent years and why we've made it to the divisional round, 2 or 3 out of the last 5 years, if you will. And now we're at the point where we're trying to break through. So who can help us at 58? Who can help us at 90? With that breakthrough. We don't really have time, to sit and wait on development or projects and whatnot. The one guy that the Cowboys whiffed on recently, not whiffed, but so far it hasn't worked out, is with Taco Charlton. And that was somebody who they reached for. And at that point, to be fair to them, they said that they didn't feel, even though TJ Watt was still sitting there, they felt like there wasn't anybody left on their board that they had a first-round grade on, so they went with the upside guy. And the Cowboys have struggled when they've gone the upside route, in my opinion. When they've gone with more definitive routes on certain players, they've had success, whether it's Leighton Vander Esch, Ezekiel Elliott, the list goes on with, even starting back in 2014 with Zach Martin. When they've had a definitive plan with certain players, they've done a very, very good job drafting, and some of these players are starting to see, re-signed and potentially be lifelong Cowboys. So they've done an excellent job in that regard. Now, the three players of those six safeties that I think realistically we will hone in on, and I think it's going to come down to these three. I think it's going to come down to Taylor Rapp, safety from Washington, Will Harris, safety from Boston College, and Juan Thornhill, safety from Virginia. Now, starting with Thornhill had an excellent combine, physical specimen, had basketball player type numbers in terms of his vertical, very fast, former corner who transitioned over to safety, hits very well, but is kind of like the ball hawk out of that group of guys, covers, can cover the tight end, can do a lot of things that we may not necessarily have on our roster right now, and I think would be a great fit, to be honest with you. And probably the number one player who you're seeing mocked most often, if you scour the internet, he's probably the most popular name right now that you're seeing mocked to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Will Harris from Boston College is a guy that also had a very good combine, ran a very fast time. And, of the three, I would actually say, just looking at his tape, and this is just my personal opinion, of the three guys, I think he's probably the least likely ready to start day one. And when I'm looking at starting, I'm talking about between the group of Jeff Heath, George Iloka, and even if you want to throw Kayvon Frazier in there. I do think Will Harris has, some ways to go in terms of his pursuit angles and certain things from a recognition standpoint. Now, why is he regarded so high? Speed, physical specimen, hits like a ton of bricks, and to me has the most upside. But now, I just talked about the upside thing earlier, and that's why Will Harris kind of scares me a little bit. But upside-wise, with somebody like a Chris Richard there coaching, could he transform a Will Harris into like a little baby Cam Chancellor that you saw in Seattle? That physical component, tying it, because Xavier Woods is also a very physical player. So, we have to see how they want to tie and marry those guys together. And then the third player is Taylor Rapp from Washington, a guy who's very decorated college career. More of a hybrid. I think he can kind of play both. I do think, from what I've seen, I watched Washington play quite a bit. He seems to be a little bit more comfortable, closer line of scrimmage, great blitzer, can get his hands on the ball, has made big plays in terms of interceptions. Very smart, heady, instinctive player. I think of the three guys, he's probably most ready to start day one. I think, he could potentially beat out a Jeff Heath or beat out a George Iloka. Now, the thing with him is, the slow 40, the upside is not there like you see with a Thornhill or a Harris. Now, because we're in win now mode, I'm probably leaning towards Taylor Rapp from Washington. He's been a guy I've really been a fan of since his freshman year when he made his introduction to the Pac-12. And, that's kind of who I'm rooting for at 58. But I would not be disappointed with any of those three guys. I think all three of them fill a need for us. The reason why I didn't address Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from Florida or Jonathan Abram from Mississippi State is I don't think those guys are going to be on the board when we pick at 58. I actually think Jonathan Abram has a chance to go at the back end of the first round, and I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson will go second to mid to second, early to mid second round. So, and I'm not a big Willis guy from Michigan State. So out of those six guys, Rapp, Harris, Thornhill, I think one of those three will be the pick at 58. The only wild card that I could see is if something happens, where none of the safeties get picked. When I say none, I mean like there's still 4, 5, 6 safeties on the board, including some safeties we didn't even visit with, like Savage from Maryland. Then the Cowboys could wait and see if somebody drops to 90. And I think at that point they would draft Damian Harris from Alabama, running back. Reason being is he was one of the 3 running backs that they brought in for a pre-draft visit, not including the local guys. And he's by far the highest rated back that we brought in. Tony Pollard's more of a kick return specialist. And Mike Weber, I think, will go 4th, 5th or later from Ohio State. So with Damian Harris, that's a guy who I'm actually very high on. And I've said many, many times on this channel, addressing the backup running back position. They've decided to move on from Rod Smith, which I think is good business for us. And the Cowboys really haven't had an effective running back committee, in terms of a group, going back to Felix Jones and Tashard Choice and Marion Barber and all those guys and Julius Jones, all the guys we used to have. And right now, yes, Ezekiel Elliott is the bell cow, but his touches are adding up very, very quickly. And at some point, you do have to worry about the player's body and keeping things intact with him. Zeke, contrary to popular belief, is in outstanding shape. I'll repeat again, Zeke is in outstanding shape. I don't understand this nonsense about his weight right now. But, if looking at a guy like a Damian Harris, who's not flashy, straight up and down runner, but, has the burst to get through the hole, kind of reminds me a little bit of a Mark Ingram. And that's what I've kind of wanted, is having, something like what the Saints had with the Ingram and Alvin Kamara, just having, those explosive options in the backfield. I think it would help Zeke. I think the drop-off, what you're protecting against is the drop-off when Ezekiel Elliott leaves the field. And sometimes we have to pick up a 3rd and 2 or just being able to just still run your offense and not shorten the playbook, but one of the issues the Cowboys got into is when Rod Smith came in the game, it was incredibly predictable what the Cowboys were trying to do, and the playbook shrunk, in my opinion. So with the Damian Harris, similar skill set in some ways to Zeke, where pass pro won't be a concern. Very good hands catching out of the backfield. He's coming from a solid program in Alabama, very heady player. I think he's a more talented runner than a TJ Yeldon, because some people have tried to make that comp. But just because he's not as flashy, or as explosive a runner as a Josh Jacobs or even a Najee Harris, who he had to share the backfield with, who was like a number 1 overall running back coming out of high school, watching these games, Damian Harris is solid, and I would be cool with if we picked him at 58 or if he drops to 90, which I think the Cowboys are hoping that they can get the safety. If the market, kind of plays out like it does, they get that safety out of one of those 3 names at 58. And then at 90, I think we're looking at either a Damian Harris or a Travion Williams from Texas A&M, who I'm also high on. Very, very competitive running back. Now, one thing I would be excited about with Travion Williams out of A&M is his productivity through the roof, and the SEC. He's probably the best pass pro guy in the draft from the running back position, and he's a different runner than Zeke. He really does provide a different element. I think he could be, kind of that 3rd down slasher, that 3rd down back, catch balls out of the backfield, versatile as well as like a Damian Harris, but much more explosive. Now smaller, probably more susceptible to injury. And the cool thing with Damian Harris is he doesn't have the amount of touches on his body that Travion Williams does. But I do know that the Cowboys like him. He's one of the local guys, and Cowboys have been, better at taking some of the local talent, whether it's A&M, whether it's Texas. So we saw it last year when they took Connor Williams, and I think at 90 is probably where they'll look to take the running back. If they go any lower, that's where a guy like a Mike Weber would be an option. But Mike Weber, talent-wise, I think there is a drop between a Travion Williams and a Damian Harris. And if you take a Mike Weber later, then you're probably going to have to get another running back. And that's a whole other thing. Now, other positions that the Cowboys would be looking at, I think, like I said, 2nd round, safety, 3rd round, running back, 4th, 5th, 6th. I'm not going to go too much in depth into that, but I think you could look at another local guy like a Daylon Mack, defensive tackle. He's probably around the 4th or 5th round, probably the best option that we'll have in terms of that big run stuffer. Because I'm looking at it from who can help supplement Woods and help him out down there. A lot of the defensive tackles and defensive players that they've visited with and shown us are smaller 3 technique guys, and I don't think that's what we need. I mean, we have a good one in Collins. We have Crawford who can shift down there. We have a lot of options. So I'm looking for more of that guy that's 320, that movable object. I mean, when you lose a playoff game in the manner that the Dallas Cowboys did, where they literally had the ball run down their throats, you got to try to get that guy in the middle there. Now, in terms of the defensive line, I think that they will pick the guy that's a riser. I think his name's John Kaminsky, who they visited with. He was another guy that blew up the combine. has the same measuring tools. He comes from a small school in Charleston. Haven't seen him play too much, but he's flown up the draft boards. I think they could look at Kaminsky as high as the 4th round. And then the other position that that they've looked at and visited is tight end. I think they could look at either one of whether it's Knox or Sample from Washington. I think there's some options there as well for them to explore and add to the tight end room as they hopefully move on from Rico Gathers. So I think the tight end room, I think they will draft a tight end. And so you're looking at, Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin, Jason Witten coming back, and whoever we draft. Now, wide receiver. I think the Cowboys, that's another area where we may look local. Little Jordan Humphrey, 6th or 7th round. He was at Dallas Day. The 18 kids that they actually brought up that were local, and I could see them looking at if a Jalen Hurd falls from Baylor, but I'm in the bag for little Jordan Humphrey. I hope the Cowboys pick him. I mean, just look at my T-shirt. So that's neither here nor there. But big picture, man. I look at the draft, and this is just how I'm going to finish the video. Is my theory and my outlook on the draft, and it's twofold. I watch a lot of college football. I am a college football fan. I'm a college football fanatic. That's why I have this channel. It's why I talk about college football so much. I'm hearing a lot of people, pundits on the internet, TV, podcasts, that I can tell they don't watch the games. They're not watching with the same intent that we watch NFL games, right? And there's just certain narratives and certain things that get pushed with certain players. I'm like, did you watch the guy compete? Because one of the things I look for is work ethic, competitiveness. Obviously the injuries and measurables have to be there to some degree, but did I see this? Was this guy consistent every time we saw him play? And the biggest thing is a Texas fan, especially when we're talking about teams that we either had to go against or teams that were in our conference, does the players scare me? It's one of the reasons why I'm high on Kyler Murray and I was high on Baker Mayfield last year. They scared me. When I'm going up against these guys, the boy from Texas Tech that just won MVP, Patrick Mahomes, he scared me. Those are guys that cause problems. During the week as we're prepping, myself as a Texas fan, as I'm prepping with fellow fans about things that we're looking at in the game, and we're like, all right, we got to shut this down. It's like, hey, this guy, Kyler Murray, when he's running around, turns into a damn punt return. People get out of position. All of a sudden, he's throwing the ball over your head for 70 yards. Those are the type of things that scare me, and that's what I personally look at. With a lot of these teams, and just over and over, if Texas was playing you, whether you're a quarterback or whoever, can we stop him? Can we block him? Can we cover him? Can we tackle him? Those are things that I personally look at, and I think sometimes these guys get lost in just the minutia of the draft and all this other stuff when the tape is sitting there right in front of you. I mean, we're seeing that right now with Ja'Kai Polite, seeing that with Lil Jordan Humphrey. Every week nobody could cover the guy, but all of a sudden you're telling me he might not be draftable, he can't play. I think it's BS. And if I was an opposing Big 12 team, be real, you were afraid of Jordan Humphrey, Lil Jordan Humphrey, especially when he got in the red zone. He was one of the best players in our conference last year. So just I know I'm sounding like I'm going to bat for my guys, but that's one thing. The other thing is these leaks that you're seeing from scouts, teams, GMs. To me, it's a lack of accountability on their responsibility to make sure that said player or players that they're drafting are successful. What do I mean by that? We as fans have to do better. We as fans consistently get on Twitter or get on these social media platforms and we say, so we're so quick to say so-and-so is a bust, or so-and-so sucks, or so-and-so can't play. But what was the situation for that player? For example, the quarterback position. Right now, this draft, last year, Josh Rosen, dream, get picked in the NFL. He goes, 10th overall to the Arizona Cardinals. Ended up being a nightmare. A coach got fired. The team sucked. He didn't have great tape because they didn't know what they were doing, and now he's going to get traded by the new guys. That's the situation. Is that Josh Rosen's fault? But we're going to sit it, and some people are going to, and I know he's going to get a second chance, but this is what happens to some of these players. The player I use, the big example I use all the time, Jared Goff, when he got drafted by Jeff Fisher, an organization that didn't know what he was doing, he looked like a bust. People are like, why did this guy get picked number one? They don't know what they're doing. Versus a Carson Wentz who goes into a favorable situation with people that do know what they're doing, and a Doug Peterson and a John DeFilippo and all these guys around that understand how to develop a quarterback and develop a scheme and make people look good, make people feel comfortable. Mitchell Trubisky, they go out, he gets drafted by John Fox, they suck, he doesn't look great. Now Matt Nagy comes along and he puts him in a situation where he can play. Myself as a Dallas Cowboys fan, Dak Prescott, comparing him to his peers across the board, the guys that got drafted way ahead of him, also have had better coaching and better situations. Even the years after with Patrick Mahomes getting picked by Andy Reid, what's a better situation to be in? Being able to sit for a year and be behind Andy Reid and really get your bearings and learn, or getting thrown into the mix like a Dak Prescott and having arguably the most inept coaching out of all these guys. And he's still successful, in my opinion. So, when we evaluate these players, are we evaluating these GMs? Are we evaluating these scouts and these teams and holding them accountable like we do with these players? Because in my opinion, if you're coming along, and this goes for any position, if you come along, you have a great work ethic, and you're doing everything you need to be doing and training your body, your mind, you're doing your film work, and you're not being coached either by your position coach or your coordinator, or there's a bad culture, the chances of it working out for you versus another player are slim. And we don't take that into account enough. Too many players are getting drafted. You get drafted by somebody. We've seen this happen with running backs sometimes. You get drafted and they tell you to gain 20 pounds because they want you to be a certain type of running back. And then the coach gets fired or whatever. They don't have a scheme for you, and boom, tell you to kick rocks after 2 years. Or offensive or defensive end that they kick inside and they tell him to gain weight, and maybe that's not what he's never done that before, the player, and it turns into a disastrous situation, and now he's out of the league. But did we hold those people accountable that drafted him without a plan for development? I mean, we look at Vince Young. He got drafted by a coach and a coordinator who didn't want him. They wanted their USC guy, Matt Leinart. The owner overruled them. Turns into a toxic situation down the road after the league kind of catches up with him. But then you juxtapose that against Aaron Rodgers, who goes to Green Bay, and it seems like it's a disaster for him falling that far in the draft, but it ended up being the best thing possible. Aaron Rodgers, they broke down his whole throwing motion. You look at the way he was throwing the ball under Jeff Tedford at Cal. He had the high release way up here. Broke down everything. All of a sudden, he's able to generate more arm strength. That's coaching and development and a plan for the player. And him sitting and watching a Brett Favre, even though Brett Favre wasn't the most receptive, he learned. And he became one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time when he got his opportunity to play. We're seeing that play out with Patrick Mahomes. A buddy of mine, shout out to my boy Bruce. He was telling me he saw an interview with Schefter, where Mahomes bumped into Schefter. And Schefter was talking about on a podcast where he bumped into him, and he said when he got to Kansas City, he couldn't even identify Mike linebacker until week 6 of that season. And the very next season, he's able to replace a solid veteran, Alex Smith, and take over and win MVP of the league because of coaching and development. All you have to do is come to the table as a coach. That's why I look at guys like a Bruce Arians and the guys that are really good at what they do. You should be able to come to the table and say, look, if you can bring me a guy that has good skill set and the speed or whatever position you coach, in this example I'm using quarterback. But if you're Bruce Arians and you can do certain things, I can work with you and I can help you take some of those flaws out of your game and get you some good habits. We saw him do it with Carson Palmer. I think he's going to do something with Jameis Winston. And we see that with coaching. Coaching makes all the difference. These GMs who are running these organizations, I saw somebody on Twitter talk about the other day, we giving these quarterbacks and these players the Wonderlic. Are they taking the Wonderlic? Because that's who to me it would be applicable for. And it's very, very valid. So you guys, I'll be back. And if something crazy goes down, I'll be back tomorrow, but most likely Friday night, maybe even a live stream Friday night to talk what's going on, kind of recap our, the first new Cowboys of 2019. But overall, hopefully you can tell from this video, I'm very, very excited for what we have going down. So please let me know who y'all want to see at 58. If you want to see us move up, if there's certain players you have in mind throughout the 7 rounds that we should address or target, chime in. Let's talk about it and discuss. Excited. I will have all my social media contacts in the box below. Hit me up. Peace. Over and out. See y'all tomorrow night.